actually read all those books last week because I didn't want to have to fight over them.
Oh,
so I went and sat in the reserves and just like read for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, that's what I do too.
What?
No, I was just gonna say I used to read them the week of, and then they would never be there.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So I was like,
I just bought all mine before the quarter started. Well, most of them. Some of them I've kind of find, but because I figured I'd probably want them later on. And I found them on Amazon. Like some of them were like a penny, so I was like, okay.
These are all lucky I always give them.
Yeah, usually every 2 hours.
Yeah.
I really liked the Wanting More book. It was actually funny in my post. I had talked about how, like, prior to reading it, I was thinking, like, man, like, you know, we've been reading a lot of books on, like, the Hispanic culture and, like, all those things. And I was like, that's really cool, but, like, I want to, like, expand my horizon. And then I pick up this book, and I'm like, that was so perfect.
I know I read your post about that. I really liked this one. The pictures in this were so good and like artistic.
I like the colors too. The colors were really warm and I don't know. The shapes were all very like soft and
Like if it didn't have those pictures, I probably wouldn't have liked it as much.
No, seriously, they're really beautiful.
Yeah. And I've heard like Cesar Chavez's name before, but I've never like known a whole lot about him. I knew he was like a migrant farmer, but I didn't know a whole lot. So it was like really cool to hear about like what he did.
And I think it's cool because this makes that information accessible to people of all ages, so you can like teach your kids about that. Because I know like I never learned about Cesar Chavez in elementary school.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's really important to be able to access resources like this, so you can like share different experiences of like immigrant people with your classroom.
And I wrote this in my post, but I volunteer at Lucille and Barger in Burlington, and then I've mentored in both McSack Valley and Burlington Edison, and those are both like really large migrant farming family populations. And I feel like having this, especially in the first grade class, or like just reading this to the first graders, who a lot of their parents are like farmers, would just be like really cool, like to see how they react to that story and stuff.
Definitely.
And there's still like a lot of, I took Bridging Barriers with Migrant Youth. Have any of you taken that one? It's really good. I'd recommend it. But I learned a lot about like the injustices that are still like happening with migrant farming families and stuff. And even though like a lot, like Cesar Chavez did a ton for like that population, like it's still like really bad.
Yeah, because people know that they can take advantage of those populations, because some people, obviously not all of the people who are working on farms are like illegal immigrants, or they're scared, even if they came here legally, they're scared of being deported because they know like a lot of people's attitude towards immigrants, which is like very negative and judgmental. So.
Right. And a lot of kids like start working at like way too young of age because like their parents aren't getting enough money, and maybe their parents might be undocumented, and so they're like, it's not like they're gonna be like, oh well, this worker is working my like really young son, like and taking advantage of him, but like you're undocumented, so you're risking like being turned in.
One of the things I said about the book was like just his age when he started all of this. I was like, I'm like around the same age.
Yeah.
I'm like nowhere near that.
Yeah.
It was just like a crazy concept to be like him being like a little bit older than me, but like around the same age, like making such a movement, and
Yeah,
it was just crazy.
that's incredible.
So incredible. I feel like I hear about people who like make like huge change in our society, and they always like started really young. And I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was interesting I guess, how different the books we read this week were, like the focuses on them.
I was confused.
Yeah. It kind of made sense, like if you looked at the module, I think it was like, let me see.
Well, the module itself kind of had like two
Yeah,
categories
exactly.
meshed to one.
Yeah, nonfiction, informational, and biography, and global Arab and Jewish books.
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Yeah. I thought the cat with the yellow star was really interesting, and I knew it was going to be about like the Holocaust when I saw the picture on the front because of the Star of David. And I liked this, but I'm not sure if it would be as appealing to younger students
Yeah.
as like the Cesar Chavez book. But I feel like with older, like 4th or 5th graders, maybe even, you could use this as a resource if they were doing, if you're doing like a classroom talk about the Holocaust or things like that.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of really interesting things in this, like pictures of her classmates and the places where like she lived. And I thought it was really interesting that because I can't remember if it was, I think it was her dad or something, because of her dad they were able to like not have to go to one of the concentration camps.
Yeah.
So I thought she was pretty lucky in that way, as lucky as anyone could be in the Holocaust. But I thought it was cool that they were able to like find a way to keep living their lives even when their lives had been uprooted completely. And like how they put on the play and they did music and things like that. And, yeah, so I guess that's just like what you have to do is like kind of ignore what's happening and just like keep living your life.
Yeah, that's what I wrote about for my gut reaction and how I forgot the caregiver's name in that room.
Yeah.
The piano teacher.
Yeah.
It was something like interesting, and it was like a nickname for something
Yeah.
else.
Mhm.
And I liked how I don't even remember main character. Is it Ella?
Ella.
Ella, and she was like, we did a lot of good things.
Yeah.
So it was really good to know that people still were able to live their lives in situations like this.
Yeah.
And how the caregiver did her best to make sure that they didn't get sick. And that she
Yeah.
was really strict in a way that was like healthy for them.
Yeah, she kept like structure to their lives,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is really good.
The part that stood out to me was when she talked about her mom saying like put on as many clothes as you can before you leave. And when I was in like 9th grade, I like keep getting these lessons mixed up, but I think we had to do something along the lines of like the Holocaust and like keeping our own diary or something like that to like pretend like we were there. Maybe it wasn't quite that. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it might have been. No, I think it was. I think we had to like pretend like we were there and write our own like diary we put pictures in and stuff. And I remember, like, an extra credit assignment was to go home and, like, put on as many clothes as you could. And, like, have your mom take a picture of you or something. And I remember doing that, and I had, like, I seriously had so many clothes on. And I brought, obviously, my clothes were different than what they would wear, but, and I had, like, my snowboarding pants on and, like, my snowboarding jacket on over everything. I looked like a marshmallow.
Yeah. But people wanted to be able to bring as many things as possible with them, you know?
Yeah.
And really terrible thing is a lot of that ended up getting taken away from them by the Nazis and like
I thought one like really good lesson that you could take from this for like kids is to have them read it, and then there's like art, like pictures that people drew throughout the experience. Like maybe they could draw something and then like explain why they chose to draw that or something.
Did you read the Diary of Anne Frank in 9th grade?
I think maybe it was 9th grade.
Yeah, because I was wondering if that's why you had to do that assignment. Because
Probably.
a lot of people use that for teaching about the Holocaust. Because it's like some of the most accessible literature because it was written by a young girl. So.
Right. And that's why I liked this one too, because it wasn't the Diary of Anne Frank. I feel like it gave like a different perspective.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, I don't know, when I was little, all I could picture when I thought about the Holocaust was Anne Frank. And that was it.
I feel like that's the only person that you ever really hear about.
Yeah.
And then like this, I was like, oh, who is this person?
Yeah, I've never heard of this person before.
I kind of wish it was, like, I wouldn't want to read a novel, but like, I kind of wish it was written in a novel, like from her perspective, because it would have been more personal.
Yeah, that's what I said too in my post. I was like, I don't think it was as interesting to me as Wanting More or the Cesar Chavez book, because it wasn't written like a story. It was more like a chronological set of events that happened.
Yeah.
And even though like a lot of it was from her like telling the stories, I think it would be interesting to have it like in her perspective and have it like have her narrating it and like saying what's going on, and maybe not focusing as much on like on this date when this
Because
happened.
the events are most powerful if you hear it as a narration. So I like was feeling bad that I wasn't engaged in it because it's such an important topic that it was like kind of hard for me to read.
And especially for kids, like the dates aren't very important, like for them, because there's no concept of that kind of thing. So, like having them read it, they'd be like, "What? That happened a long, long time ago."
Yeah.
I know for the first half of this book, I was like a little bit, how many more pages?
Yeah.
And then like at some point there was like this, oh my gosh, this is really interesting, but like I don't know at what point or why that clicked. But there was just that. And this paragraph says this.
That kind of like mentally checking out. Yeah. I found myself doing that as well, and I think that's a really good thing to think about when you're choosing materials for your students, because you want them to have like a wide range of like different kinds of books, but also you want them to be engaged in what they're reading. And I feel like even if you use the dates but put it in like a diary form, or have her telling the story like, on this day I went outside and like this is what I saw, or things like that, you know, makes it more relatable and more accessible.
Yeah. Because it's also just really long for a picture book.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if like, it seems to me like the pictures are more supplementary than anything, because it's not like with a picture book where every picture like goes with the or it's supposed to go with what's happening in the storyline. It's like, this is something that was found here, or you know, like this is a drawing from such and such, and it's interesting, and I'm glad that they put it in there, but I just feel like it's not, I don't know, kind of, I guess, distracts from what's going on in the story. Like some of them are related, but I don't know.
It almost kind of reminds me of like a textbook in that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas there's
Yeah.
kind of like not random pictures, but like not pictures that go with what you're directly saying, and kind of just like a narrative, like textbook of one person's.
Yeah.
My section for the tunnel was like all on like what biographies are there, and so like I categorized this one as a complete biography rather than a picture book,
Yeah.
just because like it does cover her like life, or maybe it wasn't a complete biography, it was a partial biography because it wasn't like birth to death, so it was like a partial. But yeah, I think the pictures are definitely just like add to it rather than this is a picture book.
Wait, so I was confused when choosing an informational book. Is this an informational book or is it
I think
both?
I think
it's both.
Yeah, it can be both. Like informational books come in different formats.
Oh, okay. Because I just was like, oh wait, I picked a biography. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
So the book,
I get it.
yeah, the book that I picked was like on Hillary Clinton, and it was a picture book, kind of like the Cesar Chavez one, but it wasn't as powerful, and it just kind of seemed like it was, I don't know, it was kind of dry reading and sappy, I guess would be the right word. It was just like, you can achieve your dreams. Like, things like that on every page. And I was just like, oh. And the thing is, like, I understood, like, the information that was in it, you know, about her, like, you know, being in the Senate and fighting for the things she believed in and stuff like that. And I just thought it was really vague, though. It didn't say anything specific. It was like, this is what she did.
Okay.
And this is what she did. And it wasn't like, oh, okay, like, this is what happened, and these are some of the things that, like, she went through and, like, trying to get to this place. It was like, oh, women weren't allowed to do the same things back then. And it just, like, left off at that. Because it talked about how, I don't know if you guys have heard this story, but she wrote to NASA because she wanted to be in, like, the space program, and they were like, sorry, we don't have women astronauts, because they didn't at the time. And so that was, like, one of the first times that she encountered, like, I don't know, realizing that, like, women didn't have as much power, I guess, in society as they should have. And so I think that's one of the things that they were, like, really capitalizing on. And it was written in 2008, which also made me wary because of the fact that that's when the presidential elections were happening.
Right.
And so I wondered if it was more about telling her story or if it was about introducing a politician to, like, younger kids or, like, trying to vie for a certain politician. Yeah, so I don't know. I thought it was an okay book, but I wouldn't personally use it because I don't feel like it tells the whole story or really, like, gives anything significant except, like, you can achieve your dreams, which is like,
Everybody says that.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, what does it mean, you know? And at the end it was talking about, like, one day we'll have a woman president and blah, blah, blah. And it has, like, a big picture of Hillary Clinton. And I was just like, like, I don't know. You know, it just seemed like a little bit shady.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of that, I had a coworker one time. We were talking about, I don't really remember what the exact topic was, but I'll never forget what she said. She is Indian, and I remember that she said that when she was little, all she ever wanted to be was the president of the United States. Like, that was her goal, and she would just tell everybody, like, I'm gonna be, what are you gonna be when you grow up? I'm gonna be the president of the United States. And then when as she got older, she like had this thought to herself, like, oh, I can't be the president because there hasn't been a white female president yet, and it has to go in that order.
That's interesting.
And like that just like really hit home for me because I was like, little kids actually think that like there has to be like an order of like marginalized people.
Like first it's the white men, then it's Barack Obama, who is like technically mixed race, but most people identify him as being black, and I don't know what he identifies as because I haven't really
spoken with him.
Yeah, spoken with him or asked him that. But either way, like people are allowed to identify themselves in whatever way that they like relate to. And anyway, so there's like white men and Barack Obama, which was like huge for our country, like a huge thing. And then people are like a white woman and then a woman of color, you know, when it doesn't really have to be that way. But unfortunately, a lot of people just people of color in general, have issues getting elected because of biases against their race. Or, women find a hard time because people don't consider them to be, like, leaders or, like, be in positions of power or something, you know. So, I don't know.
For my informational book I picked, I think it's Martin's Big Words, and it was written by the same person that wrote Eleanor. I'm forgetting her name now, but and it talked about like Martin Luther King like growing up and how he like had these big words, but he didn't know how to say them, and then he became like a pastor, and he would like pull off of all of the sermons that he had heard like as a young kid. But these weren't really like his big words until like he started speaking out about like the civil rights movement and stuff and social justice, and he like found his big words, and it was really cute. And I really like the illustrations. Just like Eleanor was pictures. Wasn't it? Was it pictures of? Okay, then this differed because there were illustrations.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay. It was the same.
Yeah.
But it was really good. I have a hard time picking books about Martin Luther King because just like knowing that he was like an amazing man for like the civil rights movement, but our like society really likes to pick like one leader in things,
that's
and
true.
he like wasn't the only leader in that movement. And but with that being said, he was still like a huge part of the civil rights movement. So I feel like if I were to pick a book about him in my classroom, this one was a good one that kiddos could relate to and stuff. Because I really liked how it emphasized like him growing up and like finding him.
And I think he's like one of the less controversial leaders of the civil rights movement, because there's also Malcolm X, who is a huge like person in the civil rights movement, and he and Martin Luther King Jr. Differed on a lot of their opinions on things, and Malcolm X eventually kind of like leaned more towards what Martin Luther King Jr. believed in, but he was very much about like, we have been oppressed by white people for hundreds of years. What are we going to do about it? You know, sort of thing. And I think that he went about it in a lot more, not that Martin Luther King Jr. didn't approach it in a direct way, but his approach was a little bit softer. And so, and I think a lot of people have like mixed feelings about Malcolm X. I would urge you guys to watch the movie about him.
What movie?
There's, I can't remember if it's just called X or Malcolm X.
Yeah, I think it's just X.
Yeah. So I think it was, okay, it's Malcolm X. And Denzel Washington stars in it. And it was
It's
just...
called Malcolm X.
Yeah, it was an incredible movie. I sat down and just, like, watched the whole thing because it was, like, 3.5 hours almost. But I was just like, oh, this is so cool. And I never knew a lot about Malcolm X. I just knew that he was involved in the civil rights movement. But it's really interesting because he became part of the Nation of Islam. And so I think that's something that kind of made him like stand apart from Martin Luther King Jr. because Martin Luther King Jr. was Christian, so I guess more people could relate to that or something. But yeah, it's just very interesting story and movie about him. And I have a feeling that they did their research and everything, so yeah.
I know, I feel kind of sad that our like school system doesn't talk more about like Malcolm X or like the Black Panthers and that kind of thing, because I feel like even though nobody talked to me about those like Malcolm X and the Black Panthers, I still like have these like preconceived like feelings towards them, even though nobody talked to me about them.
I feel like they were mentioned in texts about the civil rights movement that I was introduced to, but it was like, these were also people.
Exactly.
It wasn't like, here's their stories too, you know?
Right.
And I think that, especially now with the Black Lives Matter movement, I hope it's becoming less controversial to talk about him because he was a really, like, influential leader, and he helped to kind of, I don't know, give people that sense of power that they felt like they were missing. And I think we need to look at all of the people who contributed to the civil rights movement, not just one person, like you were saying. I think it's really important.
Well, and I don't know if it's becoming like less controversial because after like the halftime show with
oh my
Beyonce,
gosh,
like I'm literally appalled with like white people's reaction.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Especially like in the media. Have you seen that white news anchor? She's like a blonde lady. Look her up. She has a lot to say about her opinions.
I didn't even watch this.
Really?
Yeah, so Beyonce's, I don't even call them background dancers because they were like all dancing together in this like almost triangle formation, I think it was for the most part. But all of the backup dancers were wearing Black Panther like type clothes, and they had the hats on.
Beyonce too.
Yeah, and she was too.
And then they made an X formation.
Yeah.
Malcolm X, and then afterwards, some of her like backup dancers posted an Instagram picture and hashtagged Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And other things too. But,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was like definitely a statement. And then she also just recently had like a music video come out, talking or like that made like subtleties towards Hurricane Katrina and like how poorly Black people are being treated by like police lately. Well, for a long time.
Yeah.
And people are going pretty nuts over it.
Yeah.
Like this is a new thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? This is happening?
I'm just
Yeah.
like not on social media, so
Yeah. Let's just say a lot goes down on social media. Everyone needs to say their opinion about things. And I'm just like, no.
It's so hard not, like, when you've been, like, when you talk about this every single day in your classes, and then, like, people post stuff on, like, social media where you know they have
no idea what they're talking about.
It's so hard not to say anything, but I just have to not say it.
Because, you know, people, for the most part, are just not going to listen to you, which really sucks, but especially on social media, because it's so like I don't want to say inauthentic. What is the word I'm looking for? Like you're detached from that other person, so it's easier to like have things like misunderstood, like the tone of what you're saying or things like that, and then people get like really defensive because everyone can see what you're talking about. Whereas I feel like if you're having a face-to-face conversation with someone, that's a lot more productive. So yeah, and then I don't know, I just do my best to like post things about Black Lives Matter and just like put that out there in case you're interested in a different opinion than your own. Like, I don't know. So
Just think about that.
yeah.
What did you guys choose for your books, your inspirational books?
I chose a biography by someone who actually owns my dad's favorite restaurant in Seattle, and it's about the Khmer Rouge.
Interesting.
And in my post, I was like, I know this isn't an informational book, but it's a biography with a lot of information.
Yeah.
But I chose it because it's really important for me to read books like that. I haven't finished it. I didn't know we were supposed to read these books, but I didn't finish it. But I haven't even really talked to my mom about it at all because I don't know if she's ready, and I've talked to my dad about it twice. So it's important for me and my sister, I think, to get our information from books like this.
Yeah.
And it just talked about his life and the events leading up to the Khmer Rouge and coming to America and opening his restaurant and stuff.
That's cool.
I picked The Man Who Walked Between Two Towers, and it's about this guy. I have his name here. Philippe Piet, I guess that's how you say his last name. And it's about when he walked between the Twin Towers, and there was the movie The Walk.
Oh
That was
yeah.
based off of it. But it was actually, I thought it was a really cute book. The pictures were really pretty, and it was just told in a way that someone was telling his experience. So it was just and this man wanted to have this big dream and everything. But it was really cool. It kind of just showed his passion for it and his determination to go all these years in preparation for this thing.
So he, when did this happen after?
Well, it happened in 1974.
Yeah.
And so he lived in Paris or France.
Are you talking about On the String?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay,
I've
he
seen
walked
that
between. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant on the ground. He walked in. I was
Yeah,
a lot of people do
Yeah.
that.
That's funny.
No, he walked when he was standing.
Yeah.
He he was
Rooftop to
Yeah.
Okay. I thought maybe he had known somebody that had died in 9/11, and so it was really emotional for him to walk.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was a tightrope walker,
Okay.
and from tip to tip of the towers, they had put a wire across, and he walked it.
Okay.
And so that was
Okay.
I have a fear of heights, so that's my greatest nightmare right there.
I went to Oregon and Smith Rock a couple weeks ago, and people were just slacklining, so the band is thicker.
Yeah.
Just across canyons, and it was so scary to watch.
Oh my
I
gosh.
haven't seen one do it over something so high ever,
Oh my gosh.
but they fell so gracefully just with the rope right between their legs, and it was just really slow, and I was like, okay. But I thought they were gonna fall and be attached.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, how sketchy.
Nope. It's not something I will attempt.
One
I
thing
know,
about this. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I was just gonna say, I see people on campus laughing,
Yeah.
and I'm I'd be afraid to do that.
I know, right?
You're 5 feet off the ground.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's my whole body.
Yeah, no, one thing about this book, though, is at the end, it did, reference how, the towers weren't there anymore, and so it was just kind of a good way to, go into the discussion of what happened at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really liked the book.
we should probably talk about wanting more, since that was like the
main
majority
chapter.
of the reading. Oh my gosh, I loved that book. I could not put it down. I was just like, oh, this is so interesting. Yeah, I loved it. And I thought it was good for me to read a story from the perspective of someone from the Middle East, because so often we look at the Middle East with like American eyes, which, you know, like, oh my gosh, we've just destroyed the Middle East basically. And just like having a different perspective of someone who's living there, and especially like the religious like garbs that they wear, and talking about that, and I feel like it becomes less of a mystery, you know, and I feel like for a lot of people that it would be really good for them to read this and just kind of like think about the judgments that they make about people. So, I don't know.
I took a sorry.
No, you
Can I
can.
go on?
You can talk about it. I was going to talk about it, but I'll.
I took a study of religion class. I think I've told you guys that before, and we talked about a couple different religions, and one that we talked about was Islam. And for every other, for every other religion that we talked about, we read like a chapter book about like the person's perspective in that religion. And I feel like this, like for that one, it must have been like the last one that we covered or something. We didn't read a book, but I feel like this one would have been a good book for that class. Maybe the professor couldn't find one. I don't know. He was anyway. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that the book turned out completely different than what I expected it to be about.
Yeah.
Like the first couple readings, I was like, oh man, like when the mom died.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so it's gonna be about this father and this daughter like struggling through life together, and then the father is just
Abandons her.
I have so
I
many
struggled
words for
so
him.
much
Yeah.
with him.
Oh, that made me so angry. I was like,
Yeah.
how could you ditch your daughter in the middle of the city and go back to this woman who's like obsessed with herself and very cruel to Jamila? And I don't know. It was so bad. And then like he didn't want her until she'd had the surgery and she looked normal.
Well, he didn't want her until she could make money.
Yeah, basically that too. Yeah.
It was so hard for me to relate to. Like for my window, I was just talking about what would happen if one of my parents abandoned me, and I just couldn't even like think of anything to say because it's just so
Conceptual, is it?
far away. But I wanted to do research on her because I saw it was a true story, and I watched her book talk on YouTube, and it was like 7 minutes, and it talked about how that's the story of one of the girls at one of the orphanages.
It says
Yeah.
she ended up living in one of the largest orphanages in Kabul.
Yeah.
That's how you say it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That she sponsors. So then she took that, and then she took a story from one of her, I think it was like her cousin or something, and then her dad abandoned her cousin and was really cruel, and then she talked to her own dad, and she's like, why didn't you ever leave us? And then he said something about like building up a fire and how, I don't remember the analogy, but basically he had to hold the family together in times of like hardship to help them build strength, and she said that was the premise that this was written upon. So like Jamila was building her fire the whole time, which I thought was really interesting. But I felt like everything happened so fast.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I knew it like the second that she was like, he left me. And I was like, I know he's not going to come back. It just like led up to that point. You were like, no.
So sad.
Yeah,
That's
but it
just
was.
like, she had no idea.
I know,
It was like hour
yeah.
after hour, yeah, he's gonna be back.
Because, like, I think anyone would be in denial in that
Mhm.
situation. Because, like, how do you deal with that
You're just
emotionally?
abandoning your kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
really.
especially with that emotional hug. I thought,
Oh my gosh.
Thank you for taking us out of here. And he hugs her back.
I know.
And like in the book, I was trying not to judge him so much.
I know.
I was trying.
I
I was
know.
like, okay, I'm not gonna be mad at him. I'm gonna be understanding. And then it just got worse as the book went on.
Yeah.
And I was like, how do you not judge someone?
Right.
I was like,
Yeah.
I couldn't understand it,
Mhm.
or even just like in any way, shape, or form. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I kept like trying to put myself in her shoes and like imagining like if my dad would have like taken me somewhere and then just left. I feel like I still would have been like looking for him for like so
Yeah.
long and stuff and being like, yeah, like my dad wouldn't leave me. Like
Yeah.
where is he? And like I don't know. Or like, you know, when you would like get separated from your parents at the store or something
you
when you were
freak
little
out.
and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my god, where's my mom? Like,
Call them over the intercom.
Yeah.
I'd be like Home Depot or Costco and be like, I can't find my mom. And they'd be like, okay, we'll call her.
But I feel
Got the
like
mother of so to the register.
like over the intercom,
Yeah.
like embarrassing. But I feel like no matter what, like they were always there. They were just in the next aisle over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They would never really abandon you.
Most of the time it was because I was like spacing out or like doing something else. Like I'd be in the section with all of the different lights. Like that was my favorite in the hardware store because it was actually interesting to look at. And so I'd just be like in that section. All of a sudden my parents would be gone. They'd be
That
like,
is-
"Ah!"
That is the coolest part of
Yeah, right?
I remember this. I think I was in Fred Meyer at home or in Puyallup, and I was with my mom, and all of a sudden I see this little boy like who's like wandering around. There's like no parent to be found, and he just looked like really like lonely, and
Aw.
scared kind of, and he was maybe like 4 years old, and I like walked up to him and I was like, hi, like, where's your mom? And he was like, I don't know. And he looked like he was gonna cry. And so I was like, I'll be right back, Mom. And I like walked him over to like the, I don't know, information
Mhm.
desk or whatever. And I was like, I found a kid.
Yeah. I have a 4-year-old in my possession that does not belong to me.
And they were like, okay, we'll find his mom.
Yeah.
Like, you can go, or whatever. And I was like, no, I'm gonna stay
Yeah.
until I know his mom shows up. And she eventually showed up, but she had like 3 other kids with her. I was like, okay, understandable. Like,
Yeah.
that you have a handful right
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my gosh. Yeah. How can you keep track of all of them?
Your kids are so funny.
I know.
Oh my god. That freaking video of the girl, or the woman
Oh my
reading the poem, all
Oh,
over the
yeah.
video.
Yeah.
Sing inside this.
I know. Oh my gosh.
That was so good. I freaking loved that. It made me want to write down all of the things that I've heard like,
Yeah.
so far in like
Yeah.
classes and
Oh my
stuff.
gosh, like in our 401 book, and he's talking about how like this guy like just writes down everything that his child says, and I'm like, I want to like start a thing of like everything my nephew says. I'm like,
Yeah.
I have missed like 4 years of his
Yeah.
talk. I'm like,
Yeah.
I should have been writing this down.
Oh my gosh.
I was sitting out in the hall one time with a group of little like first graders, and the second grade class is like right next door, and this girl is like walking from the bathroom. She's like way far down the hall, and she like I like looked up because I heard her walking, and she looks at me and she's like yells like, I have a silent E in my name. And I was
Wow, good for you.
okay, like cool. But like she was probably just in class like learning about what silent E's are and like thought that I knew exactly what she was talking
Yeah.
about. I was like, all right. And all the like first graders were like, looked at me like, what is she
Yeah.
doing?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, they get so excited about little things. That's why I love elementary school kids. That's why I want to work with them because they're just like so excited about life.
I know. Oh my gosh, there was a. Okay, this is way too off topic. I'm not going to go there. They had a Dr. Seuss party on
Oh, okay.
Wednesday, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, the quotes were so funny, but and I was trying to figure out like how I was supposed to write them.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that they were funny.
Yeah.
But I just think that they remind us of so many of the things that we've forgotten that are really important. Like no one has
Yeah.
said a peanut before. And I guess that could be really profound.
Yeah.
But what I liked is in the interview with her dad, her son named the book for him, and it was like, "Does the Land Remember Me?"
Mm-hmm.
or something. And I just thought that was like the perfect title and the perfect question. So I thought it was cool also to see how the mother or the daughter and father were both writers, talking about like the events leading up to their pieces and how they were connected to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting to hear them talk together.
I liked that we were kind of exploring the relationship between Israel and Palestine too, because that's a huge thing that's going on right now, and it's largely been ignored because it's such a controversial issue, as Israel is like one of our allies, and so I know like President Obama has spoken out about how he doesn't agree with the way that they're treating the Palestinian people, but like having had the privilege of like actually going to Israel, and like we stayed in Jerusalem, and we went, and in order to get to Bethlehem, which is like on the Palestinian side of the wall, you have to go through the wall. And when we like went through there were a bunch of Israeli soldiers with machine guns that like checked your passport, and it was so scary. And I was like, imagine being a Palestinian person, like as an American they're just like, oh okay, like go on through.
Wow.
You know, and
But it just seemed super scary.
yeah, and they always like have to have their papers with them just to go to work if they work outside the wall, and like it's just so bad. Like the whole thing is just terrible. You can see how much they're struggling because obviously business isn't as good because like a lot of people don't want to go through the wall to have to do that, and then also like a lot of people can't find jobs outside of Palestinian territory, and it's just so bad. That whole situation, just like trying to block out a group of people. It's basically what Donald Trump wants to do with Mexico, you know. And I get it because the Jewish people have been through a lot, you know. And so coming like back to the homeland and like having that be allocated as a space for them was like a big deal. But the problem is there are people living there, you know. And so I don't know. It just seems to me like they're doing the same thing that's been done to them for so many centuries. Like they're oppressing other people, and you would think they'd be more like aware of that, you know?
You would think.
Yeah. It's just.
I know in my
upsetting.
post I said that I wasn't gonna write about that section just because it was like a lot.
Yeah.
And it like overwhelmed me. But after I read all of yours, I was like, oh, they all commented on it. So I went back and commented on it. And I kind of said that, like what you were saying, like it's kind of hard to see like they're doing the same thing that's been done to them.
Yeah.
But I kind of talked about how like I kind of see how they're doing it just because they're, at least I took it this way, that people act this way just because they're afraid of it happening again to them.
Yeah.
Or like just like violence being treated towards them.
Yeah.
So like they act out in violence or in horrible ways first.
Yeah.
So it's not done to them.
Mhm.
And it's like this just an endless cycle of like we're gonna do it first so it doesn't
Yeah.
happen to us. and then it's just like, but
When does it end?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
at what point do you live in peace with these other people? You know, and one of the really interesting things about Jerusalem is that the city is divided into like quarters, and there's like a Christian quarter and a Muslim quarter and like a Jewish quarter, and so it's very interesting. And in like the Christian quarter, there was like a Lutheran church there, which really surprised me. But like we went, and because my family is Lutheran, we went there, and it was just like this group of people that would like spoke English, and they would like worship there. And I guess they were either traveling to Israel or they lived there. I'm not exactly sure, but I was just like, the fact that this is accessible, like an English,
Right.
like Lutheran, not to mention Christian, but like Lutheran church in a country that like doesn't primarily speak English, you know.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting. But the other thing was we could hear the prayers. They had like towers that would do the prayers for the Muslim worship time, the prayer times at like ridiculous hours of the morning. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like, how do people wake up that early? Like, but oh my gosh, yeah. So it was like all hours of the day. It was just very interesting to be there because there are all these different groups that are like somehow coexisting in this community. And it's just really interesting to see because they are in like different places, but at the same time, they're like all together.
Right.
yeah.
It's just
When'd you
weird.
go?
When I was in 7th grade, I was 13.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because both my parents used to be pastors. My dad had a midlife crisis and decided to go in a different direction with his life. But my mom is a Lutheran pastor, and so every 7 years that they serve a congregation, they get to go on a sabbatical for 3 months, which is basically just a break where you do like continuing education and take some time off from being at the church. It's like a way of maintaining like a healthy relationship with your congregation and like reinstilling like why you want to be there. And so the only reason we were able to go is because my mom is a very good writer, and she applied for this grant and we got it, and so our family was able to go on that trip, and it was an incredible experience. And I actually had to miss a month of school to go there, but it was in May, and we checked with all my teachers, and they were like, go. Like, this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Like, you do what you need to do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so my mom and I were actually there for a month, but my dad and my sister came the last 2 weeks when we were in Israel. But we went to Greece, and then Turkey, and then Israel for 2 weeks.
Wow.
It was incredible, and I really did get to see, like, a different culture, and it was very interesting. And a lot of Greece is has kind of like accommodated the tourism and everything there, but there were certain areas in Turkey where like my mom and I were the only white people there.
Yeah.
And so that's the only experience I've had with being like an outsider, was like being in a really like conservative area of Turkey and walking through the street and having people like follow us.
Yeah.
Like people followed us around. There were little kids that went inside their house. They were like, "Mom!" Like you could tell that's what they were saying. Like, come see these white people. But we looked so different from everyone else that was there because like
you were white.
Yeah, we were white and blonde.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting.
Yeah.
So
my parents were just recently in Greece and Turkey. They took a Mediterranean cruise, and it's like right now Greece is going through like really terrible like economic crisis, and so they had to get all of their money beforehand and then bring it to Greece. But they said there's like coins in Greece right now that are of no value anymore, and so but to like give them value, there's a bunch of people like all over the street, like vendors that are like you can go to them and then they'll like you can help them crush the coins and make them into jewelry and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
And so my aunt like bought earrings, and my mom was going to, but they're really heavy.
Yeah.
And so their coins are a little bit different than ours, but yeah, so they were like too heavy for her. But it was really cool that they were like giving that value.
Yeah.
And stuff. When I was little, my dad went to Western when he was in college, and I grew up Baptist Christian, and my parents told us that we were going to go on a trip to Bellingham, and I was like 2 or 3, and I was so excited, and I was like about to cry, like I was so excited, and I was like, oh my god, like usually when they would get us in the car, we would just like sleep the whole time until we got wherever, and I was like not sleeping, I was so excited, and my dad turns around, like we're almost to Bellingham, and he's like, Natalie, I'm like, why are you so excited about Bellingham? I was like, we're gonna see where Jesus is born.
Oh my gosh.
I thought we were going to Bethlehem.
Bellingham, Bethlehem. That is hilarious. That's like one of those things that little kids say, like the woman was talking about in the video. That's so funny.
And so, yeah, I was really disappointed.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure I cried when he was like, no, it's Bethlehem. We're going to Bellingham. It's still in Washington. And I was like, oh. But he thought it was really funny that I thought we would only have to drive 2 hours.
Yeah.
To and I was like 2 or 3. I didn't know. Like,
oh my gosh. That is so funny. That is so funny. Oh.
One of the last videos I wanted to talk about was the We Teach Life, Sir. It was actually probably one of my favorite videos of our content this time. And I just thought it was like so powerful. Like normally in poems, I'm like, oh, that was a nice poem. I'm like, okay, let me think about this. What does it actually mean? And I had to listen to it like 4 or 5 times. But like this poem, I felt like I could really understand it, and like the way she just talked about it was just super powerful.
which poem?
We Teach Life, Sir.
Is that its own video?
It was one of the links we had to click.
Yeah.
I just ended up clicking all the links.
Oh, okay.
It was. Yeah. I think it was just one of the links that we looked at.
Okay, well, it was one of the links. But yeah, so I'll read some of the quotes that I really liked. So she was just talking about how, I forget what she said she was, but she was kind of like the spokesperson or something. And one of the things was like, someone, like, people would ask her, like, hand me the list of your dead, hand me their names, and 1,200 word limits. And so she just kept like talking about how like she feels like she's just this there was a word for it. A soundbite, which is just like a small little clip of a video, and she feels like her life is just kind of like confined to that, like just word limits and like all these facts of like, oh, I'm just gonna shove it all into this small category, and she just feels like that's not who she is. Like she's much more than that, and she's not just this thing that's confined to this small area. And so I thought it was like just super powerful, and like the thing that she kept getting asked was like, why don't you just teach your people not to hate? And then so that was like the We Teach Life, Sir. Like we're not just people like who, like we don't hate, you know. It's like that's not who all of us are.
Yeah.
Was she Muslim?
She was Palestinian, so yeah. But I don't know. I thought it was a really powerful one.
Yeah.
Going off of that, in one of my classes, we recently watched a TED Talk about including multicultural literature, and the lady did a talk at a university or something, and a student went up to her and asked her something about Africans, but like it was just like a generalization, and I don't remember what it was, but her response was like, because there have been white serial killers before, she was like, oh, you're white. I'm so sorry that you have a history of serial killers.
It's true.
Yeah.
I think the statistics are like white middle-aged males are like the majority of serial killers. So.
Yeah. Well, then, like, my argument when people say, like, or say that, like, Muslims preach hate is because there have been, like, Muslim terrorists is, like, those are extremists. They're extremists in every religion. There have been Christian terrorists in our country,
like
too.
people who bomb Planned Parenthoods
Right.
and kill people, you know?
Yeah. It's just people who are really uneducated about it. It's really funny because the religion of Islam is so similar to Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the basic, like, foundation of Christianity and Islam are so similar, it's insane. Like, throw out, like, a few names, put in a few new names, like, throw out a couple, like, rules, put in a couple new rules. They're literally the same foundation.
Yeah.
And people are just really ignorant.
It's because they don't know what it is, so they assume things, and they don't educate themselves on it,
Yeah.
and then they just judge it based on, like, the hate that people spew in the media and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, people don't realize that we're all working towards the same thing. Like, all religions, it's really... My coworker made a little chart thingy the other day. I don't remember how he did it, but, like, in the middle, it was God, so which can be, I don't even know how to explain it, because not God as in, like, God, but, like, just the thing that everyone is trying to explain, and everyone has different rules, but it's really all explaining the same thing, just different names, and people don't realize that everyone's so similar.
Yeah.
And it causes so many problems.
Yeah.
And it's, like, hard for me to relate to, because I'm not religious at all, so... fighting about something like this, I'm just, it's so beyond me.
Yeah.
Right. I know. I have a really hard time, and like my boyfriend's family, I've talked to you guys about them before, they're just really religious, and like that's just their life, and that's what makes them happy, and so like that's okay with me, but what's really hard is that like Jake and I are like living a different life than them, and like they will never be able to accept that because they feel like that's their purpose, is to like help lead us to the truth. And it's hard because like Jake wants to be like, no, like I don't think that's the truth, but to say that would like break their hearts, and to them like being like formally renouncing his faith is like a really long process. It takes like 2 years. It's like a like intensive like interviews and tests and stuff. And to do that would mean a lot to him because he doesn't like want to be a part of that faith, but it's also like, is it worth it to like excommunicate yourself from like that part of like your family and like friends and stuff? It's like, it's not really worth it, like you know. But it's hard because like no one is ever gonna like accept that like he's different and that he has different beliefs, even though like he's comfortable accepting that like they have different beliefs and like a different lifestyle and stuff. I don't know. I feel like people, I don't know. I'm making like a huge generalization here, but I feel like typically people who have taken themselves out of religion for like a moment of time or forever have like a better understanding of like different lifestyles or different
Yeah.
religions.
I would agree with that.
That's a huge generalization.
No,
I could
but
be wrong, but
I also think it's important to question your faith, and like that has been a huge part of my life because I was raised in Lutheran church and I wasn't ever exposed to anything else. That was a part of like, I don't want to say my teenage rebellion, but that's kind of what it was. Is like I was like, I don't know what I believe, you know. And I talked to my mom about it, and she was like, "Well, we're gonna love you no matter what, and you like need to feel free to like explore that for yourself." And in like my confirmation class and stuff like that, like we actually went to a service that was in Hebrew at a Jewish temple, and that was super interesting. And you know, I think separating yourself from what you believe in, even if you're just like doing it hypothetically, it's really important because then you're not blind to everything else that's going on in the world. You know, you're only seeing it through that one lens.
right.
So I don't agree with that.
Jake's a psych major, and he had to like make a pretend study, and it was like his question of thought was, if you know that your professor is like of a religion, like identifies as like a member of that religion, or any religion, like do you listen to them differently, or do you like go to their class like in a different way, kind of with like a little bit of a wall up, or
Expecting certain things.
right, or do you like listen to them more, or whatever. That was like his like question, and it actually got selected. 3 of them got selected, and his got selected, and they studied it, and it's like true.
Yeah.
Like when we know that like our professors are like identify with a certain religion, we go into our class or into their classes. Either if we identify with that same religion, we will listen to them more, or like be just more receptive of what they're saying. And if we don't identify with that religion, we take everything that they say with like a grain of salt, and we like have a little bit of a wall up.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
But it makes sense. Like I don't know. But taking this back to teaching education, I feel like it's really important to know about your students and about how you can accommodate to like their religion and stuff. Especially like with people who identify as Islam, if they like pray, I forget how many times, 6 times a day. I don't know. Then like just being like accepting of that and accepting of like the food that they eat, or I don't know, different things that come with like different religions.
Yeah, and having a space for them to do their prayers if that's part of what they like want to do or need to do during the day, you know, to practice their faith. I feel like that's really important because even though school is like a place for learning about different things, it's also a place where you should feel safe to be yourself, and like there's also a lot to learn from religion, I feel like. And so I don't think it's bad to have people like praying, as long as they're not like proselytizing. I think that's the only thing that people are concerned about, really, is like people trying to convert like their children to other religions or something, which is like that's just not going to happen. But yeah, it's interesting because you hear people say like keep prayer in schools, or like why is like one day should know your God taken out, and it's like that wasn't even added to like the 60s or something. And but then when it comes to people of different faiths, like Muslim people wanting to pray in school, they're like, no, like that's so terrible, you know? It's like, you can't have it both ways, you know?
I guess the meta question that I have could be, how do you create that space?
Yeah.
It's like if it's a time that's really sacred to them, you can't just have a room where every different religion can go.
That's true.
Or, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
110.
Thank you. I have a question, or kind of a meta question. Hold on. So both my parents worked for the Puyallup School District when I was growing up, and my mom worked in the district office. She was the executive director of secondary education, so she picked the things that went in our curriculum. And she picked a book kind of similar to this. It talked about a Muslim girl and her experience, and we were supposed to read it in 9th grade, which 9th grade in our schools was junior high, but in most other schools, it was considered high school. We were in high school, but we were in the same building as all of the younger students. And so it was I remember having an assembly where they would explain this to us, now you're in high school, so these grades really count for college, but you're still in the building as the middle schoolers. And so it was just a really confusing thing. But anyway, and so my mom's point with putting this book in our curriculum was they're in high school, they should now be being exposed to other things, other perspectives and that kind of thing. But parents went nuts, and I've told you guys before, it's super white, Christian, suburban community, middle class, and parents went ballistic and were you should, my kids shouldn't learn about this faith because I don't want them changing their faith, and I raised my kids Christian for certain reasons. Anyway, this could be a many question. How do you talk to parents?
Yeah, how do you deal with parents like that?
Yeah, if I wanted to include books like this in my, or books like this in my classroom, and parents had strong negative feelings towards Cesar Chavez, because I know some people do, what do you do in that situation?
I feel like you could argue that you're the teacher, and so you get to decide what the curriculum is, and also, it's the parents' decision whether or not they want their kids to, be exposed to that, but they better homeschool if they don't want their kids to go to public schools and learn about different opinions, you know?
I think that was my mom's argument back. If you don't want them to learn that, then you can school them at home.
Yeah, you have a choice in that. You could send them to a Christian school. Yeah. That's what you want to do. Then, but public schools are a place where you have a bunch of different people from all different kinds of backgrounds coming together in a classroom, and only catering to the white Christian students is not enough, you know? And I think that's one of the things that we've been talking about throughout the quarter is this is necessary. It's necessary for people to learn about different perspectives, because if they don't, then they don't become empathetic and kind and thoughtful human beings, you know? That's part of the way that you become a mature and understanding adult who makes a difference, you know? So. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. No, it's okay. We just need to think of one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye. Let's see.
other books about the civil rights movement that have leaders.
Yeah, like
in
Malcolm
art.
X and
Yeah,
like
like
we were
good
talking
children's
about.
books.
Yeah, definitely.
What time?
1:15 now.
1:50?
15.
Oh, 15. Okay, this is long. I just guessed all the times of the other one. So,